I was born with a super rare genetic disorder. I had about a 30% chance to live. Grew up, difficult life, bullying, body image, all this different type of stuff, self-worth, inadequacy, and found my purpose when I found sports, when I found wrestling. And so I wrestled. From wrestling, I became a prankster. From prankster, I became a bodybuilder. From bodybuilding, I became a speaker. And now, at this point, at 28 years old, you get all versions of Nick. And so instead of me killing off specific versions of myself because I think I need to be a specific type of person to get acceptance and love, I think I'm coming full circle to just being me.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I'd like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. On today's episode, we are back in Dubai, and I'm very excited about today's conversation. I'm going to be talking to a public speaker, an entertainer, and an all-around incredibly inspiring man. And this is Nick Santonastasso. Welcome to the show, bro.
Let's go. That was crush. We've done some interviews. That was a great one. Thanks
Awesome.
for having me. I'm glad to be here with you.
Dude, it's an honor to have you here. We've met off camera, just privately, several times at this point. And the first time I met you, I was like, man, we need to have this conversation, because I've been following you online actually for a few years.
Well,
and I'm just like, man, this guy's awesome. He's inspirational. And I also knew I would meet you at some point. I didn't expect that it would be here in Dubai, but I just had that sense. I've had this many times with many people where I'm like, I don't know when we'll cross paths and where, but it's bound to happen.
Wow.
And here we are now. So Nick, I know who you are, but for my listeners who are not familiar, please introduce yourself.
yeah, great. My name is Nick Santonastasso. I was born with a super rare genetic disorder. I had about a 30% chance to live. When I was born in 1996, I survived. All my organs were 100% healthy. The only thing that was affected were my limbs. And, grew up, difficult life, challenging, bullying, body image, all this different type of stuff, self-worth, inadequacy. We can go deep into all those rabbit holes and nuances. And found my purpose when I found sports, when I found wrestling. And so I wrestled. From wrestling, I became a prankster. From prankster, I became a bodybuilder. From bodybuilding, I became a speaker. And now, at this point, at 28 years old, you get all versions of Nick. And so instead of me killing off specific versions of myself because I think I need to be a specific type of person to get acceptance and love, I think I'm coming full circle to just being me, and the rest will follow. And so we met in Dubai. I moved here 5 months ago, and I'm the man who wears many hats, many talents.
That's awesome. Before we get into your life story, how are you finding Dubai so far now that you've been here?
Dubai is the most incredible place that I've ever lived in my whole entire life. I think I'll go on a rant for Dubai.
Yeah.
I'll go on I don't care. I'll go on a little rant.
Everybody thinks we're paid because we just like the city so much. I'm like, no, people aren't being paid. People just like it.
No, not getting paid. Would love that. But let's go down the list. I think the first thing is I built myself over the last 8 years into, I would say, my hallucination is a pretty valuable human being with the skill sets and the message and the brand and the exposure, all the things. And when I came to Dubai, I've never felt more valued. I've never felt more seen. I've never felt more heard. And the leadership wants to work together. I've lived 28 years in America. I've never been invited to the White House. No one ever in government or Congress or whatever has ever reached out or wanted to do any sort of collaboration. And then I'm here 5 months and I'm already doing massive collaborations with leaders or governments or big initiatives. And I don't say that to show off. I say that because you really need to understand, if the environment you're in doesn't value you, you start to question your own value. You could be an extremely incredible, valuable human being, but if the people around you don't value you, unconsciously you start to question your own value. You start to play smaller. You start to be less than. Maybe you start to get complacent. Maybe you start to go backwards. And so when you pair up a valuable person with a valuable environment, magic happens. And there's been absolute magic here. So that's the first thing. I think it's just incredible environment. The other thing on a nerdy level, let's go a little bit nerdy, is meditation, prayer, it's all the same in the sense that it's like you're taking quiet time to set intention, to reset, to recalibrate, to ground yourself. The majority of the population here prays, is it 5 times a day?
5 times a day. Yeah.
5 times a day. So whether you believe in the same God or not, whether you're praying to the same thing, the collective consciousness of Dubai and UAE is cleansing the energy 5 times a day. That's powerful. Insane.
Yeah.
Right? For those that believe in energy and know, if you know, you know. But if you don't know, maybe you should go down a rabbit hole after this podcast and be like, this guy talked about energy. I don't really know what that means. Go down that rabbit hole. So overall consciousness and the energetic frequency of this place, it's the highest. I think it's one of the highest. The other thing is you can't flex money here.
Yes, I make this point.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't flex money here, and even if you have a Bugatti, the guy next to you has a Bugatti with the number 3. You know what I'm saying? Like, his license plate costs more than your whole family. And so it does a few things. The first thing, at least for me, it got me out of the rat race of comparison because I knew I'd never win. In a good way. Yes. Like, I got acceptance of like, all right, I'll never be a crown prince. You know, like, I'll never own 400 oil rigs, or I'll never own a country. Who knows, right? Maybe this is limiting beliefs. But I'm saying it's like the comparison of like trying to get to the next level. There is this level of inspiration, but there's also a level of be content. Like, enjoy where you are. I love that. Also, because you can't flex money, relationships are built off of what's your values, what's your mission, where are you going, and if the visions align, I want to help you. And then the way that the leadership runs the country, it's a mastermind. And for those that don't know what a mastermind is literally where you put brains together, you sit in a room and you talk about solutions. By the way, notice I didn't say talk about problems. You talk about solutions, innovation. Everybody can share their different perspective. No one yells. No one gets angry. And so this culture is so dialed in. And I'm on a mission to break the stigma of what most people think UAE is in Middle East and Dubai and Abu Dhabi, because this is the next level.
We don't
stuff.
want it to get too overpopulated, though. The traffic's already pretty bad.
True. Let me buy my real estate first, and then you guys move, right? But it's just like, God bless the UAE.
Yeah, man. Were you surprised, being from the USA and having grown up and spent the majority of your life in the USA, were you surprised by how much you like it here? Because we come from quite different positions on that. So I'm originally from the UK, but I actually lived in Saudi Arabia for 20 years. So from age 1 to 20, I was predominantly in Saudi Arabia, although I went to the UK for boarding school and university. So I spent, kindergarten to 5th grade, I was in Saudi Arabia. And then through my teenage years into young adulthood, I was still predominantly living there, as were my siblings, as were my parents, and tons of my friends all grew up in Saudi Arabia. So back in that time, we're talking 90s and then into the 2000s, pre-social media, pre-smartphones, pre-free flow of information in the way we have it now. I mean, we have it now when people are still ignorant, but you can imagine back then in the, in the late 90s or the early 2000s, and you're telling people, oh yeah, like I'm living in Saudi Arabia, not even the UAE, Saudi Arabia. And the things that people imagine and the prejudices they have, and it was just kind of wild. So I'm wondering, as an American, were you, some of the things you're saying now and how much you like it here, are you a bit surprised? I don't know what preconceptions you may have had when you were younger, but were you surprised? Yeah,
it's a great question. And I want to be very calculated with my answer. Without going off the rails, because Nick has all different forms of himself. But I would say during my 8 years of entrepreneurship and traveling and speaking all over the world, I was used to getting humbled. I was used to being like, this is not what they told me it was. My first big example of that was Colombia. And so, I tell Colombia to my parents, they're like, cocaine, Pablo Escobar, cartels, which rightfully so, because during their age, there was a time in Colombia where bombs were going off multiple times a day, car bombs all over Medellin. Colombia is one of the most special places in my heart. I lived there before Dubai. I was actually going to move to Colombia and scale the digital company. Okay. I was like, I'm just going to, go over here. And I went to Colombia and I lived there 2-3 months. Incredible friends. learned new language. Not very good. I'm still working on English too. But learned a new language. But it also, I have to go off the rail here. The food was way cleaner. The water was cleaner. And that's when I started realizing, well, if you really cared about me, you clean up the water and you clean up the food. If you really question the system, you would realize that the same people that make your food make your medicine in America.
And they used to make your cigarettes.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would call my parents, like, what are you doing? You're in Colombia. And I was like, come visit me. And I'm the baby of the family, so they really have to do anything that, I'm like, come visit me. It's not, they came out here. They're like, Colombia is one of the greatest places on earth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And because they got to experience it. Yeah. So fast forward to Dubai, I'm pretty open. But I think I'm open because of my years of travel. But I was very surprised on the culture, how welcoming it is. The Majlis style. I love that as well. Although the neighborhood of the Middle East has, friction and there's conflict, there are incredible spots that are unbelievable. I mean, there's incredible people all over. We just have conflict in the world, unfortunately, right? But yeah, I was definitely blown away. I was blown away by the infrastructure. I was blown away by the leadership. I was blown away by the food. I was blown away by the service. I was blown away by how dense of the network is. Dubai is big, but it's not. It's very small. And I've never been in a global hub where there's so many powerful people in one place.
If you're a fan of dystopian fiction and sci-fi thrillers, then you should check out Lucid, a new novel by writer Michael S. Milano. Lucid is a 21st century blend of 1984 and Brave New World, set during a devastating pandemic. The year is 2084, and the Pansophical Corporation protects what's left of humanity from the deadly Timbuktu virus and a terrorist organization known as Praxis. After losing his wife to the pandemic and being assaulted by public safety for violating curfew, citizen Anthony Sartori begins to have bizarre flashbacks. In a culture dominated by suspicion, asking the wrong questions could put him in the crosshairs, but Anthony is determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. Lucid is an exciting and timely read that cautions against collectivism, technological surveillance, and sacrificing freedom for the illusion of safety. If that's up your alley, go to lucidthebook.com and grab yourself a copy today. That's LUCID, thebook.com to get yourself a copy. Free to be safe, safe to be free. lucidthebook.com. It's kind of a sad reflection on just humanity and the way people are, that we're so drawn to negativity. I always say that, normal doesn't go viral. So for somewhere to make the news, it doesn't matter which direction it's running in. If I'm in the UK, UK and US on paper have a pretty close relationship and they have a lot of ties. And obviously we speak the same language and share some history. But if you're in the UK and you hear news about the US, 99% of the time it's something negative. It's a shooting. It's a cop killing somebody who in dubious circumstances. It's some, hate crime or hate crime hoax, or it's something crazy that's happening in politics. It's not something good. Similarly, the inverse, if the UK makes the news, in the USA, it's because there was a stabbing. It's because there was some horrible crime that was committed, which was covered up. It's because of some crazy thing that people are upset about. It's the same with cities, it's the same with nations and so on. And this flies in all directions. And people often forget that people recognize that other countries have propaganda, but they often forget their own country has propaganda, right? So if you're an American listening right now and you're like, oh yeah, China has propaganda, Russia has propaganda, all these countries have propaganda. I'm like, you don't think that the USA has propaganda? Like, did you grow up watching G.I. Joe? Like, have you know?
Of course. Of course.
And it creates this perception. It's part of what stops people from traveling. Like, most people do not travel internationally. And part of the reason is the fear. Colombia, oh no, that's scary. Mexico, no, that's scary. I know people in the UK who are afraid to go to the USA. They will not step foot in the USA because they just think it's just guns and racist cops and all of these horrible problems. And They think you'll just step out on the plane and you walk into a gun battle or
Grand Theft
something.
Auto.
Yeah, and then Americans, I know many Americans who are like, oh no, I can't go to the UK because there's all
Yeah.
these stabbings and there's this and there's that, and I'm just like, man, I wish like normal life goes viral. You're never going to be watching the news and they're like, hey, it's a sunny day in Chicago and everybody got on fine and people went to work and people look after their kids and had fun. So it just happens in every way, and I just think it's a shame. I don't know how that bias is overcome, especially if people are unwilling to make the move. But I don't know. It's part of why I'm such a big fan of travel and interacting with people from different places, because it crushes these prejudices, and it also just opens up so many opportunities, because it opens up more of the world to you, more people to you, because you're like, oh, actually, most people are decent, or at least trying their best to be. It doesn't matter their background, their color, their ethnicity, their nationality, all of these things that have been drilled into some people's heads from young, that, no, they're the bad guys. They're the ones. It's not true. Most people are good, or at least trying to be. Are there bad people? Yes, and they are distributed all over the place in every continent, and you can avoid those. But genuinely, most people, if you treat most people with decency and respect, it will be returned. And that should be obvious, but it's not to a lot of people.
Has greatly put. I think there is, especially in America, there's this indoctrination that they're the center of the world and there's like no one else out there. And like you said, there's beautiful people all over. And I think what makes that evolve is similar to what you said, was how fast information is distributed nowadays, right? I think people travel most because they see a TikTok, right? And they're like, wow, that place is actually incredible. And then they're tagging the Airbnb, and right. So I think more people get to see the perspective of life. Did you see the whole thing with was it Red Book or something with China?
Red Book. I don't.
So basically, when TikTok in America was getting banned, mm-hmm. And that was at shutdown, there was an app. It was like Chinese Reddit or something like that, and the Americans and the Chinese were talking unfiltered, and they were like, the Chinese were like, "We feel bad for you." They're like, "We thought we were supposed to feel bad for you," and there was this evolution in consciousness, because they realized they were both getting propaganda. They were like, there was a whole movement of Americans moving to China. They're like, I'm moving to China. They're like, the roles have reversed, and I think it's just information, right? And so my greatest piece of advice for those that are listening in and around this topic is leave your hometown. Just leave your hometown, book the flight, book the ticket, figure it out, take the risk, go for it. Your biggest misconception is that you have time. We just get in this unconscious cycle that we think we have 5 years. Who's to say you have 5 years, 10 years? Even us as young guys, it's like every day I know, I'm like, oh, this could be it. It gives me a level of urgency. It gives me a level of, I want to jump on decisions. I want to execute. I know how fragile life is. I want to take risks. I want to travel. I want to do the thing. And so please travel. Please get out there. I don't care where you go, but just travel. It's gonna change your life. And you're going to see that, like you said, there's brilliant people all over the world.
Yeah, I want to go into something you just said there a little more, because I think we share that life philosophy. And I get the sense that, I know for myself, and based on what you've just said and listening to some of the things you've said in your speeches, I think that we are both hyper aware of our own and other people's mortality, which can sound dark and morbid and negative to some people, but it's like, no, if you understand that properly, I believe it makes you a very motivated, very positive, very gracious and grateful individual, because you recognize that, tomorrow is not promised today. So I guess in my case, part of it comes from, I'm from a very big family. So I'm one of 5, but my dad's one of 11. My mom's one of 8. I had over, many have passed away, but I had over 50 plus first cousins, and they've had kids, and so my wider family is just enormous. And something that comes with that, which almost no one ever discusses, is as you get older, you see a lot of death. People get older. So if you have dozens and dozens of aunties and uncles and cousins, as you get into your 20s, your 30s, people start passing away. New life is coming in, but people are dying. So you kind of get familiar with, every year or every couple of years, you're going to lose a family member. And then also, as you get older, just people pass away, your friends, parents, people you may have known from childhood, illness happens, accidents. And so I'm just very, very conscious of that all the time. I'm aware, like, I hope I have many, many more decades to live. But yes, inshallah, right? But it's not guaranteed. So the way I conduct myself, the things that I do and don't do, and the way I treat other people, and it's part of the reason I don't hold grudges against people, right? I don't want to, I've got this animosity with, I don't know, I see people that they've got beef with their mom, they've got beef with their dad, beef with their brother, beef. I'm like, they're not around forever, man. Like, whatever thing you've got, like, unless it's the most severe, incontractable issue, just like forgive them and move on. Don't act as if it's guaranteed 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they're always going to be there, because a time might come where, I don't know, something happens and now you're feeling horribly regretful because you hung on to this grudge. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I guess given you said when you were born, the doctor said you had like a 30% chance of survival. I'm sure they hit your parents with all sorts of scary predictions and possibilities. So can you talk a little bit about how that has shaped your life and your thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for the elaboration on death and the urgency of it. I really think that's powerful. For me, just think about this: is like I wasn't supposed to survive. 1 in 12, 30% chance, and there's still moments where I forget to be grateful for life. And so if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, I'm grateful for life, like even me, the one who's on the bonus round, like you just get caught in the conditioning in everyday life. But now as an adult, death is a very common thought for me. Almost like I scare my team almost like too much, because I'm just like, yo, this could be it. Let's really enjoy this trip, or let's really enjoy this meal. It's very top of mind. Because I'm also, and this is gonna be not like any other podcast I've ever done. I showed up late. I'm all the way over here, but the truth is, I'm fascinated with the question of like, what is this? What are we doing? Like, what is this? What is this body? What is this avatar? Why am I put in this avatar? Why do you look like that? Are you real, or is this just my dream?
I hope so.
Who knows?
I've heard rumors that I'm an AI.
Yeah.
But hopefully enough people have met me by now.
You never know, right? But I'm just. Does anybody like sit around and be like, "What is this?" Like just stare. Like you're observing this meat suit guy. Like I'm fascinated with life, and I also know that it's very fragile, and so it gives me a level of urgency. It gives me a level of gratitude. It gives me a level of making decisions and not regretting. And it also, like you mentioned, makes me more present with day-to-day interactions and people. Like even here, like this is just my observation, is a lot of times people have served, like people, janitors and cleaners, like they kind of get like, people don't pay attention to them. And I'm always like, hey boss, hey sir, how are you? Like they just want to be seen. And so all in all, life is wild, death is real, and you're not going to be here forever.
No.
And so you better optimize your time here. You better love the people close to you. And then also, like you said, know that you're going to experience a lot of people leaving. Like you're going to experience having someone in your life and they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Like when my brother passed, it took me 6 months to realize my brother died. That's how just like deep into work I was, and just on to the next cycle.
What do you mean by that? It took 6 months.
When my brother overdosed, I got the call, and then I called my sisters and let them know their brother wasn't coming back. And then within hours, I was on a Zoom call teaching kids. Like literally right back into like being Nick and being the teacher and the expert, and like not feeling it, right? And in our day-to-day, like we're so stimulated, so we use all these things to soothe versus feeling, right? We work, we eat, we drink, we smoke, all these different things so we don't feel. And so like my brother died, and maybe I thought I felt it and thought clearly I didn't, because 6 months later I was in my bed and I was cleaning up my text message inbox, and I saw his name, and I clicked on it, and I saw that the blue went to green. And I saw the last text message. It was months ago. And then I was like, I looked at my girl at the time. I'm like, oh, my brother's dead. And then I just like broke down.
Yeah.
I just cried.
Older brother?
Yeah, older brother. So yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
And if you don't experience it, you don't know.
Yeah. That's heavy, man. And the reality is, I'm not trying to depress anyone with this conversation, quite the opposite. The reality of the human condition, and you can extend this to anything that lives. You can extend this to all animals. You can even extend it to plants if you want. But we are all going to go at some point. It's inevitable. It's a matter of time. It's not if this is going to happen. I know there's people trying to do all this weird immortality stuff these days. I don't think it's going to work. But like, that's just how it is. Every single person who has walked this earth, all of our ancestors, everyone we know right now, all of our friends, all of our family members, ourselves, at some point, we're going to go. And I think particularly in the modern developed world, I think we are more detached from that than any other humans in the past. If you were growing up in any previous century, people were very conscious and aware of death because it was far more common. Life expectancy was lower, infant mortality was higher, more women were likely to die during childbirth. We were far more likely to die in war or know people who did. There were like real severe pandemics that were happening, and without any type of cure. And this was just how people lived. There was famine, starvation. Now there's twice as many obese people as there are hungry people. That's never happened in human history. And even when people do pass away, it's still sanitized. It's often in a hospital setting, and it's just more clinical. And I'm not complaining about this, to be clear. I'm glad that people are living longer and we're less likely to go to war and die of famine and stuff. But it creates this detachment where I think people just sometimes forget. People get so lost in all the hype and the scrolling and the screens and the day-to-day stuff and the politics and the culture. And people just kind of forget to step back and zoom out and be like, oh, actually, there's a ton that we should be grateful for. I think that in itself would fix a lot of the mental health crisis that people talk about. I think there's a lot of factors, but I think if people were just more grateful for what they have compared to what almost anyone previously ever had, or what most people around the world do have, that would be a factor to it. I'm curious to know, Nick. I want to learn a little bit more about your childhood. So I've heard you speak on it before, but tell me what it was like growing up. How was it for you? Because I know the man you are now, but what was it like for you as a child?
Yeah, for me, at an early age, I didn't really realize I was different. I think as a kid, you're very pure, and the world hasn't tainted your brain and your soul yet. I'm sure I noticed little differences, but I think the biggest challenge was middle school and high school. And for me, it was like the whole relationship dynamic. And so when your friends are going to proms and dances and they're dating, and you're not dating, and you don't have that type of connection, I think that leads to you feeling like you're less than or inadequate or not enough. And I would create these beliefs and stories around the things that I never had because of my body, and I was a big victim, and the world would say rightfully so, that I was just not doing so well. And that pain, I literally had two choices. I was like, you can either take your life or you can figure out how to fall in love with the vessel, right? The no legs and one arm isn't going away. So what are the ways that you can increase the capacity of love you have for yourself and the love for your vessel? And my main thing was, if I could become like an athlete and a wrestler, that my identity would shift. I would feel more confident. Maybe the girls will like me because I'm a wrestler, and maybe I'll love myself a little bit more. And so that pain forced me to shift, and my shift was to go amputate 5 inches of this limb off because my bone was going faster than my skin and I couldn't do physical activities with it. So I decided to amputate 5 inches of this arm off and then became a wrestler. And that changed my whole entire life. But childhood is difficult for everybody. You know, it's difficult for everybody because most of your beliefs aren't yours. You pick them up from someone else. And so during your whole life, during the whole time you were in school, people said things and you didn't know that you started to believe them. That you were stupid, you should sit over there, you're not good enough, you'll never have friends, whatever it is. Everybody's been programmed in some sort of way. And so for me, it was a nice crucible. It was a trial of passage. I think it created a lot of negative emotion, which I was able to transmute into success. You know, like you look at me now and people are like, how'd you get this far? And it's like, the reason I got this far is because every time I got something, it never felt enough and I thought I needed more. And for 8 years of my entrepreneurship journey, I would say like 6, 7 of it is seeking validation from other people. And I'm just turning the corner on realizing that the only person that's going to make me happy is me. Nothing materialistic will ever fill a spiritual hole. There's nothing the external world can give me that's going to make me feel great. You know, you think it's the money and then you make the amount of money and then it doesn't make you feel anything. You get the car and then the car doesn't. You realize it's all fake.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It kind of racks your brain.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell people it's like when I was broke and my rich mentors would be like, money doesn't solve everything. I'd be like, damn, great. Give me your money.
Yeah.
You know, I'll take your money. Write me the check, bro. More money, more problems. Like, what does that mean? Give me, you know, I never understood it until you make the money. You know, there's a version of you that was like, man, I wish I could make 10K a month. And then you make 10K a month. You're like, man, if I could just do 50. And then you do it. And then you just kick the ball down the street, you know? And so I don't know if I answered your question, but childhood was make it or break it. It was either take your life or love your life. And I never had the power. I never had the strength to take my life.
I'm just dwelling on that last sentence you just said. I never had the strength to take my life. It's almost like you never had the weakness. Maybe that's a better way to frame it. I'll dwell on that one.
I like it. I received that.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I think it was like the strength that prevented you. Yeah. What was the dynamic like with your family? So obviously when you were born, for your parents, they must have felt all sorts of emotions, right? And then you're growing up. It's weird enough just being a kid, growing up anywhere in the world, right? It's just a strange experience. But then being there, obviously, with your family, your siblings, and then going to school and interacting with other children. Of course, your body is the only body you've lived in. Yeah. So there's not really a direct reference point. But I'm kind of curious as to how did your parents communicate that with you? How were other children with you? Was it a curiosity? Was it something people were understanding about, about? Just a combination? How was it?
It's a great question. I think in 1996, at least the way that my dad described it, is people like me were still kind of hushed, you know, shunned, or like it wasn't like a celebration. It was more of like a pity thing. You know, the family feels bad for everybody. And my parents went through a lot of challenges. You know, the doctor saying to abort me, their own family saying like you shouldn't have it. They called me an it. That really messed my dad up. Even if he survives birth, you should give him away. And they like had to drown out all of the experts and all their family and friends, and said like, we're gonna go through with this pregnancy, and we're gonna figure it out. Like this is not an option. Like we're gonna figure it out. And when I was born, when they took me home, they didn't like pre-frame my brother or sisters. They didn't be like, hey, by the way, we're coming home. They just like, they came home, didn't say anything, just put me on the table, unwrapped me, and they, you know, my brother was like, cool, like, look at this. Like they didn't know because.
How old would he have been?
Like he'd probably been like 7.
Okay.
Yes, 6 or 7.
Okay.
And they didn't put an emphasis on it. It was just like, this is your brother. He's different. And then that was kind of just the way that they rolled me into the family. And then the environment dynamic was really massive because my parents, of course, as I'm a baby, they're helping me, but they would put me in situations that forced me to figure it out on my own, right? So at a specific age, my mom started just putting my clothes in front of me. Be like, okay, Nick, like try to put your pants on, and here's your shirt, and she would try to show me how to do it, but they would never do it for me, and it pushed me to become independent. Okay, I can dress myself, and then they would take me to the next thing. They would put me in a high chair with food there with a spoon, and they'd just be like, mess with it, go for it, and I'd try all these different things. So I got really creative and very solution oriented at an early age, which I believe has helped me a lot in business, is because the creativity, the resourcefulness, the resilience, and being solution oriented and focusing on the solution versus the problem. Also, I failure was very prominent in my life. It wasn't a thing that I was sheltered from. It wasn't a thing that I was held away from. Like, I failed at everything. I probably failed more than the average kid because everything was hard. Yeah. And so I developed an empowering relationship with failure, which changed the game. I mean, just think about how many people right now are listening to this podcast that won't post content because they think it's going to fail. Or they won't start the podcast because they think it's going to fail.
Or someone's going to make fun of them.
Exactly, right? So just think, like, all of the indoctrination that stops you from ultimately living the life that you want. And so that was the dynamic growing up. The other dynamic was my dad immediately reached out to like the mayor and was like, hey, this is baby Nick. I want you to announce to the community that he's here. And so he took the total opposite route of like, instead of nobody knowing who my son is, his frame was like, everybody's going to know who my son is. And then he rallied and they did fundraisers and big philanthropy things. Like, they were doing the thing. And then sibling wise, beat up and picked on just like everybody else. My siblings destroyed me. My brother was a wrestler, so I'm always getting thrown up on the couch. And my sister was a gymnast, so she taught me how to handstand onto the toilet and handstand onto the chair. Like how I got on here, like she was a gymnast, so she taught me how to flip and do things. And then my other sister, Megan, she was as I got into like middle school and high school, I love food. I'm an Italian kid, so if I don't work out, I'm just chubby. And she would always, make fun of me for being fat, and so that pushed me to be active. And so it was very aggressive, in a good way, aggressive childhood, of like no one treated me different. And then the social dynamic in school is, luckily, I had incredible friends, and not intentionally, but my incredible friends were also jacked, scary friends. They were
okay.
They were like it was the wrestlers. And so like, as in physical bullying, none of that. Social bullying, no. Really, bro, it's like I probably created a lot of my own suffering. Let me just take a second on this because this just came to me. I probably created most of my suffering. And the reason why I say that is because your external world is direct reflection of your internal world. Your brain is the best detective, and your brain is always going to try to find evidence, or it'll create evidence to prove yourself right. So if I have the belief that everybody's always making fun of me, if I'm in the airport and there's a random couple laughing, I'm going to think, what?
They're laughing at you.
And they're not even laughing at me. If I have the belief that girls don't like me and they're disgusted about me, if I'm in school and a group of girls laughs, what do I think?
They're laughing at you.
What if Nick's whole childhood wasn't as bad as it really was, but that was what he saw? You don't get the life you have, you get the life you focus on. So now, right now, I'm having this awareness right now in this moment was it as bad as I said it was? Did they not like me as much as I share on podcasts that they didn't like? I don't know. Do you know that most of our stories aren't even accurate?
Yeah, of course.
So who knows?
Man, that's an incredibly powerful point. And it's so interesting to hear you frame it from your own perspective as it pertains to your anatomy. Because I've made this point about a lot of the isms and phobias and different forms of bigotry that our societies and cultures, and particularly in America and in the UK, are obsessively focused on. Racism and sexism and this phobia and this, all these isms, especially over the last 10 years, there's been so much politicization and culture war hype and so on. And I've had conversations with people, there are people who share my skin color and they walk around all day long, their entire lives, like, well, the whole society is structurally, systemically, institutionally, top to bottom, it's racist, there's white supremacy, there's blah, 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 right? And I'm sure you've come across these people in conversations, this whole mindset. And it's exactly like what you just said. So whatever scenario they're in, they have this belief, they're 100% convinced that everyone out there is harboring this bigotry and this racism, and they don't like them because they're this color and whatever. And every minor thing, right? I'm sure you've heard of microaggressions, right? Every little thing, someone asks them where they're from. Someone just looks at them. Maybe someone just mistreats them, and they filter everything through that lens of, oh, it's racism, it's racism, it's racism. There are some women where everything is sexism, right? They believe, the patriarchy is out there. Every single man, whether we know it or not, we're somehow out to get them and to prevent them from progressing and so on. So every single day they are experiencing. I've heard women say, like, every day they experience sexism. I'm like, every day? Every day? And then you ask them to describe it, and they're just describing things that happen to everyone. Oh, this person was rude to me. I mean, you don't think people are ever rude to men? You don't think, right? You don't think a white guy has ever experienced, like, someone being an a-hole to them? I'm like, I think that this mental framework that you have built and established is a much bigger issue than the reality of these problems, especially in modern society. If we were 100, 200 years ago, these conversations would be different. But at this point, like, you kind of have to, like, unless you're just extraordinarily unfortunate, you kind of have to, like, look for that level of bigotry. Like, I've met a lot of people. Have you met a white supremacist? Like, I've met a lot of people, right? And I'm not just encountering on a regular basis, like, whoa, this person's like an actual Nazi. Like, it's a pretty unpopular stance, right? And so it's kind of crazy how so many millions of people, they walk around with these things in their head and these assumptions about other people and how other people are looking at them or thinking about them or laughing at them or whatever it is. And in some cases, it's all imaginary. Or 99% of it is just in their own head. In most cases, I often say most people don't care about you. And I don't even mean that in a bad way. Just like most people, as we walk around our days, who and what are we generally thinking about?
Us.
Mostly thinking about ourselves. Yeah.
We're deep.
we're totally in our own.
We're deep in some
brains.
rabbit hole.
Yes, like we're fully in our own heads. We're not walking around like, oh, I bet this person is like, no, you vaguely notice people, but everyone's thinking, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I got to take care of this, I've got to handle this. Like, that's how most people are walking around. They don't even have the time to be having any type of whatever about you. And then as we've already said at the beginning, you travel the world, you go to different cities, you meet thousands of people, interact with people, and you're just like, I'm like, most people are like, humanity is mostly past this. Not entirely, because tribalism still exists, but like most people are just trying to do their thing, and we're mostly on the same page regardless of our beliefs, our backgrounds.
Of course.
We're trying to live our lives and be healthy and look after our loved ones and
do our best.
Get by.
It's so beautifully said, and the reason why people stay in that lens is because if they let the lens down, they were wrong. They don't want to be wrong. Imagine living your whole life believing the harder you work, the more money you make. But it's not true. The harder you work, the more tired you are. It's not working harder, it's working higher. Closing $1,000 takes the same energy as closing $1 million. It's just a different deal. So what I'm saying is, if you have the belief that you always get the short end of the stick, you're going to create or see the short end of the stick always. And it would be a massive hit to your ego to be like, maybe I don't get the short end of the stick. And then you'll start seeing, and the magic will start happening. But people we're addicted to our own suffering. Just think, if your primary emotion is inadequacy, anytime that you feel confident, your brain's going to want to destroy that feeling because it's not the normal feeling. That's why we like to go there. That's why we like to create things and focus on things that make us feel a specific emotion. We have this emotion. It's called an emotional home. It's a place where you go to most frequently, and typically it's unconscious. So I have this process that I take people through just by like a few questions, and they identify where they live emotionally. What suffering emotion have you feel most frequently? And then they realize who they've hurt because of that emotion. But most of us are addicted to our own suffering, and we don't want to be wrong.
Yes. I think there's
So
one
they'll hold
more.
on to it.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think it goes even further than that. I think that in modern times, there is some social clout to victim status where people actually want to play that game, because in certain circles, if you can prove that you're somehow oppressed or you're somehow marginalized, then it's almost like it's unearned virtue points, right? It's almost like you're somehow a better person because you are this combination of intersectional identities, and therefore your voice and your opinions and everything are actually more powerful than someone else who is more privileged in the hierarchy. And then even further, because I've thought about this a lot. I've spent a lot of time thinking of like, why is this victim mentality thing so appealing to a segment of the population? I think another one is people don't just they want to be right. I also think people like to have a permanent alibi. So if I fail, if I don't succeed in something, if I try something and it doesn't work, and I can fall back on, yeah, but like society is set up for people like me to fail. I'm a black man, right? Society isn't set up for people like me, right? It's all the white man system and so on, right? If you're a woman, it's not set up for women, right? If you have a certain condition or a disability, well, it's not up to, right? So you can take your wins and take credit for your wins, but you can outsource the right. You can outsource the losses.
Yeah.
And we all know, like, people don't really like to take personal responsibility, right?
Yeah.
People like to have an excuse. People like to have an alibi. Well, it was this, it was that. It wasn't me, right? Or I couldn't have done anything different. It was that. It was society. It was the culture. And I think that combination of things is why that mentality is so appealing to people. Because I've just seen all sorts of individuals play this game. It almost doesn't matter what their identity is, because there's some truth to it. Like, I mean, we talked about earlier, like everyone experiences sickness and tragedy and you can make a strong case that we're all victims, because right, like you could make the argument that the entire human experience, individually, collectively, is a great tragedy.
We didn't ask to be here.
We didn't ask to be here. We don't.
What is this?
We don't totally know exactly why we're here.
We have no idea.
Right? Bad things happen all the time, all over the world. In fact, the more aware you are of it, the sort of sadder it is, because you're just like, oh my gosh, on any given day, any given hour,
Right now.
terrible things are just happening everywhere, and we're all gonna die, and we have to like be in this rat race and just grind, and people mistreat us, and bad things happen to good people, and sometimes wicked people seem to evade justice, at least on this earthly realm. And then if you don't have faith, if you're someone who only believes in the material world and you don't believe in any type of God or you have no faith, and it's just the animal kingdom, it's like that's even darker. And it's just like, oh, like, you know, do we just pursue pleasure? Then that leads people to hedonism. Or the flip side is nihilism, where it's just like, well, it's all pointless anyway, and we're all just like advanced apes on a spinning rock hurtling around a giant flaming ball of gas. Nothing means anything. These are the kind of people who, like, they don't even believe that human life itself is valuable, because they're just like, well, we're just animals. So if you believe, if that's someone's belief system, downstream they tend to have a lot of other viewpoints. These are the kind of people who often they tend to think that, you know, oh, the world is overpopulated, and human beings are this plague on the planet. You shouldn't have children, because having children is selfish and it's bad for the environment and climate change and so on. I'm just like, what a misanthropic worldview. Like, if I adopted your worldview, I can see how you're reaching these conclusions, but I'm just like, man, we don't want to get to a society where that's how huge chunks of people are thinking, because then it's just like, what's the point of it all?
For sure. And you know that comment we made when you were like, people don't really care about you? Like when you're walking down the street and people think you're looking at them, you're really thinking about this.
Yeah.
You're thinking about this like whole world view.
I'm interviewing Nick. Yeah.
Like going really deep. But yeah, I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned, and people could take away from this that goes in alignment with what you just said, is the meaning we attach to the thing becomes the thing.
Mm.
The meaning we attach to the experience becomes the experience, and ultimately, whatever meaning you attach to the experience, that's how you'll feel about it. And so whether your meaning is like, this is all pointless, or your meaning is like, this is incredible and it's a once in a lifetime, that'll be totally two different lives. And the truth is that you create the meaning and you can always change the meaning. I think very similar to that is, I think most populations have a negative meaning towards death, but there's a lot of religions, there's a lot of tribes that it's like a celebration. So they feel differently about it. So there's a part of the world that feels scared about death. There's another part of the world that's like, this is the beginning. So just think about that. It's like, okay, if Nick just told me I'm a meaning-making mechanism, and the meaning I attach to the experience becomes the experience, then is this the beginning of my life or is this the end? Is this a problem or is this a worthy opponent? You know, is this guy triggering me or is he a great teacher? Everything comes, like the matrix comes down to the meaning. And as a 28-year-old man with no legs but arm, for 19 years, the meaning that I gave my vessel was disgusting, inadequate, curse, not attractive. And for the past 9 years, it's, I'm a unicorn. I'm a one of one. What a crazy vessel the Creator gave me to shake people up. If I saw a unicorn on the side of the street, I would stare too. You see that? It makes you laugh, but the meaning makes you feel differently. And so for those that are listening, I want you to be conscious of the meaning that you're attaching to the things around you. And if you can shift the meaning, you can shift your life. And that's a superpower, is to go through this life, and regardless of what happens to you, is to find the empowering meaning.
I love that. Was there a particular thing that happened around 9 years ago that caused this shift in your thinking and self-perception?
Yeah, I always think it's an accumulation of growth. You know, I don't think for me, at least, there was this one moment. But I would say, when I went to my first Tony Robbins seminar, it was the first time that I put a magnifying glass over myself and realized like how jacked up I was, how screwed up I was in the sense of like programming and triggers and patterns and all these different things. And so I think maybe there's not one moment, but the moment you self-examine yourself and find one thing where you're like, oh, my sister used to do this and that's why I believe this, and wow, that's why my relationship sucks. Like once you get one of those patterns where you're like, oh, I'm showing up in my relationship because this happened when I was 5 years old. Once you have one of those breakthroughs, you can't stop. You're like, what else is there? What other kinks in the hose are there that I can unkink to let the flow? And so I think for me, it was like the first time I put on the personal development goggles and realized like you have a lot of work to do. And there's a whole lot of conditioning from the past 19 years of your life that you need to shake off, or you're going to pass it on to the rest. And so I think for me, it was just a combination of things, combination of moments of insights and awareness and breakthroughs.
Feel free to answer this question however you see fit, because I don't know your beliefs and stance on this, but how would you describe your relationship with God?
This is an incredible question. There is undeniable proof in my life that I am plugged into something greater than what I can see here. And my relationship, this is a loaded question. I was raised Christian, when I was around maybe 13 years old, I looked at my mom. I was like, well, does that mean, why is everybody else wrong? If I'm Christian, does that mean Hinduism, they're wrong? Muslim, they're wrong? And I don't know if she knew how to answer that. And so after that, I kind of went off. I was like the black sheep, and I kind of went off and just was like, I don't know what my belief is. I don't know I don't have a religion. Let me just see what that is. But uniquely, I have my own unique relationship with Christ, and not many people like this, but that's fine. I believe that Christ was a teacher, and his teachings were misinterpreted, and that he was trying to tell us that we are it. We are the magic, and the magic is in Christ is in all of you. Like the magic is within all of us. And I also, learning and studying Christ, he anchors the analogy of being an offering to the world. So whether Jesus was made up or whether he was a real dude, the story says that he gave his life for us. I think the most fulfilling life is a life where you build yourself into the greatest version of yourself and give it to the world. And so it's the same thing. And so in the sense of like my relationship with Christ is that incredible teacher, and he was an offering to the world. And his methodology was like, build yourself into the greatest man and greatest woman and serve as many people as you can. And if you serve enough people, you can have anything you want in life. So that's my philosophy with Christ. Then I come over to quantum theory, quantum physics. I come over to energy. I come into frequency. I come into neuroscience, unwiring and rewiring the brain. And this brings me along the journey of everything is energy. Things are just at a lower vibration than others. And so, for example, like this couch is like the lowest vibration because we can feel it, we can touch it. But then, have you ever had a moment where you thought about someone and then they called you?
Yes.
That's energy. Have you ever had a moment where you felt like someone was staring at you, you turned and someone was staring at you? Yes. You felt it. There was energy, right? Have you ever had someone walk into the room and knew they were a bad person? Energy. And so you can't see it, you can't taste it, but you know it's there. It's like wind. It's like you could feel it, you could see it, but you don't know where it's coming from. And so my belief these days is everything is energy. And if you tune into the right energy, you can collapse time in a 3D world. So if I flood myself with the emotion of gratitude of having something that hasn't even happened yet, I can just draw it to me, and then eventually it'll drop into my timeline. There's been multiple moments of magic in my life where it was like, you don't know how it happened, but you also do. And so overall, my answer is everything is energy. Energy attracts energy. That's why toxic people tend to hang out with toxic people. Positive people tend to hang out with positive people. That's why the most successful people that you see, there's like this energy and aura about them. They're positive. They're vibrating at a high level. And people who are not very fortunate, a lot of them there's this very low frequency. And so I just believe there's something there. This 3D world, we've lived in it our whole entire life, but we know that we're of something else. We're of soul. We're of something. And I'm fascinated by it. And I think, like, I'm fascinated with the Egyptians because they spent their whole time figuring out, like, what is going on here. And they were brilliant. And if you go into the whole rabbit hole of pyramids and aliens, how did they do it? Like, I think we were more dialed in than we are now. I think we're way more dialed in, way more tapped in, way more in tune, way more present. If all the magic happens in the present moment, because the only moment is the present. And just think about how many things right now in our day-to-day keep us away from the present moment. We can't nearly be as powerful as we were. You can't be nearly the magician you were if you're not in the present moment as much as the Egyptians. We're not in the present moment as much. And if all the magic happens now, here, now, they were tapped in.
It's a very humble answer, man. And it sounds like you're a seeker. You're seeking. You're asking a lot of questions. As you started talking about more ancient societies and civilizations. It's so weird. I was literally having a shower the other day, and sometimes I just like ask myself a question in my brain's weird, and I'll just like have a question will just pop in my head, spurred on from previous conversations or maybe something I've been watching or listening to, and I just had this question in my brain of like, if you could ask this question either individually or collectively, but if a modern man was transported back, it could be 200, it could be 2000, it could be 500, however many hundreds or thousands of years ago, and was just kind of dropped into one of those civilizations, would he, and say he maintains his knowledge and awareness from 2025, would he be seen as like a genius and wizard and like the smartest, most dialed in, most enlightened person in the whole society and community? Or would it be somewhere in the middle? Or would he kind of just be like, they'd be almost like shocked by like his backwardness and just like his materialism and inability to like, just, I don't know, like it's weird. Modern people, speaking very generally, it's like in some ways we're so clearly technologically we're advanced. But we've maybe, right? But it's like we've made so much progress. People like to think of progress as a straight line.
Yeah.
And there's areas where we've obviously made progress. Some of the ones that are measurable.
Yeah.
In particularly things that we can measure quantitatively, we've generally made progress. Life expectancy is longer. Infant mortality is down. All cause mortality is down. We have this, we have that. Economically, GDP, there's fewer people in abject poverty across the world than ever before. We've made all of this progress. But then you can look at other things, even some which are measurable, and you can see, whoa, this is way worse than it used to be in the past. There are many things that you can look at, even compared to the 90s or the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, like, oh, this is on a bad trajectory. And then there's the things that we just can't measure, right? We were talking about, I asked you a question, what's your relationship with God? And if you look particularly in the West, people's faith, however that's defined, like all religions, like people even just believing that there's anything beyond our material world, like that's declining. And there'll be some people who are like, well, yeah, that's good. Like that's all nonsense. And, you can't prove it. All right. Like that's all superstitious nonsense anyway. Some people who have that view. But that's certainly not my viewpoint. I'm a Christian. But it's like, well, you're seeing whether you're thinking of this purely from a faith and spiritual perspective, or even if you're looking at the downstream real world ramifications of it, what's happening with depression? Woo. What's happening with loneliness? Woo. What's happening with relationship breakdowns and intergender relationships between men and women? Ooh, that's declining. What's happening with all these? So it's like, and people have become so detached that even if there's a conversation about mental health crisis, almost no one will even consider talking about faith and religion and the impact that has, right? People will talk about pharmaceuticals. Maybe they'll talk about food and lifestyle. Maybe they'll talk about social media and scrolling. It's like, well, what about people's relationship with God? Like if you went back 100 years ago in the US or in the UK, like it would be obvious to people that if you detach people from their relationship with God and any element of spirituality, and they stop going to church and they stop being they're like, yeah, obviously they'll get depressed. But it's like, we've become so scientific and so rational that like that thought doesn't even enter the brain of many people. You kind of see what I mean? So it's like, you're smarter maybe in a way, but like you've lost thousands and thousands of years of ancient wisdom. You're just saying all those people, all these thousands of years ago, all that stuff, like they just had it all wrong. That's essentially what you're saying. C.S. Lewis called this chronological snobbery, which is a fantastic term.
Yeah.
Which is this idea that people in any modern moment
think they're better.
Yeah, they think that they are better and smarter and so much more moral than everyone who ever came before them. So I don't know. I just think it's so foolhardy. I think there's this hubris of just saying like all of these ancient people, all of that, like they didn't know anything. Whatever I have, whatever we believe, like we've just got this on lock. And I'm just like, well, clearly we don't, but also just seems silly to throw away thousands of years
It's fascinating.
of wisdom. Yeah.
I think you beautifully said. Similar analogy is I think we're more head centered versus heart centered these days, right? I think we're so head centered and, like you said, analytical and science, and we don't feel enough. And who knows? I mean, the heart came before the mind, and the heart has its own intelligence of its own. So maybe we're missing out on some really deep heart wisdom because we're not tapped into it, right? But I would agree with what you said. Is in a lot of ways we're not evolved. The illusion of evolution.
Yes.
Right. The illusion of evolution and thinking. Yeah. In some ways we are, but I think we're split. I love I think that's one of the greatest things too about UAE and Dubai is even though it's modernized, the ancient wisdom and culture, they don't sway on. It's like you respect this, and this is the way it is.
Yeah, and there's a reason for it all.
Because it works.
It's part of the reason why, like, for lack of a better term, I am and have always been more quote unquote conservative.
Yeah.
Because, are there things in societies that need to change sometimes? Yes, absolutely. Am I against progress, like good progress? No, I'm not, right? Am I totally opposed to all change? No, of course not. There are things that need to change, and change can be good, but it's not inherently. And if something has been working for thousands and thousands of years, and there's a way, especially when you look at like different cultures and societies, something I always like to consider is if an idea and a way of doing things has come into being or has quote unquote evolved in the West and in China and in Japan and in the Arab world and in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe and in Africa, like they've all independently have reached, okay, this is a good way to structure this society or an idea. Like they've all reached that point. There's there is, whether or not you like it or it's the perfect path for every single person, there is a very good reason, probably a litany of reasons why they all converged on that idea. Maybe it looks a little bit different here and it looks a little bit different there because of their cultures and traditions. But I don't know. There's this thing in not everyone, but a lot of people's mentality of just like, nope, we just need to tear the whole thing down, dismantle it all, and just rebuild from the ground up. And it's just like, what are you doing? Even if you just think of it, think of anything with any type of complication. This microphone, these cameras, a car, a helicopter. The idea that like, okay, we're just going to disassemble the whole thing, take out all the screws, just disassemble it all, and just, all right, like, you're not even qualified, but just put the whole thing back together, and don't just put it back together, but put it back together better than it was before.
Yeah.
Like, what is the probability that you're going to somehow do it better than it was previously? And I don't know. I just think that mindset, as you said, it's far less common here, but I think certainly in the US, in the UK, in Canada, like there's just that constant mentality, and there's this battle. It's part of why there's all these conflicts happening politically and culturally, because there are some people who are like, hey, this thing works, like, let's keep it going. And you've got it as like, nope, like, no, tear the entire thing, like,
for sure.
Tear it all down. In fact, there isn't even just man and woman anymore. That's not even real. Like, we're going to even deny the sex binary.
Yeah.
And we're going to, we need to rebuild, and you can just be whatever, even if a child is born. Don't worry about their plumbing and their chromosomes. Like, no, just whatever they choose, whatever. Like, just everyone make up your own thing.
Free for all.
You're just complete free for all. And you're just like, maybe, just maybe. Maybe that's not the best way. In fact, maybe there were some civilizations who even tried that before, and we don't hear about them because they didn't make it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. It's, do you know the Kabbalion?
I don't.
Kabbalion? But it was like the ancient wisdom that the Egyptians were learning about the laws of the universe. But it was trickled down to like Asia and India, and you're like, yo, if everybody took a piece of their knowledge, they probably had some good stuff. Success leaves clues.
It does.
But I also think it's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I also think we were reset. I think like we were like, there was civilizations that were super advanced that they like buried and destroyed the wisdom, and so like we like civilization got reset. Like the the Tartarians?
It's possible. I haven't gone deep on this rabbit hole.
Oh, really?
But it's
like free energy.
Mm.
Like, were the pyramids energy conductors and they were giving free energy? Like, what were they doing? Had they manipulate matter and pick things up that typically we couldn't? I think we got history is in the hands of those who wrote it.
It is.
And that's crazy.
It is crazy. And you know that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Because you could see that happening in the future. So given where we are now, even technologically, I don't know how many countries, dozens of countries have like nuclear weapons, right? So in theory, there is the firepower to essentially destroy all of global civilization. That could happen. Lord willing, that's not the way we go, but there's enough nukes to do it. And if that happened and there was just this nuclear holocaust, nuclear winter, and I don't know, let's say the population goes from 8 billion back down to 100 million or 10 million. And every city is leveled. All the knowledge is leveled. Obviously, the internet is gone, like all of that. And then those people have to rebuild. They have to reproduce again, rebuild, make the knowledge again. If that were to happen, then once things are somewhat rebuilt, then yeah, I mean it's possible, because then they would probably struggle to believe that like this used to exist and there were thousands upon thousands. Yeah, there were thousands of cities like this and so on. They'd be like, come on, show me the evidence. It's like, well, the evidence got leveled.
It's under the ground.
Yeah, the evidence is gone and it's been buried. So it's possible. I don't know. I'm intellectually curious, right?
I don't know either.
Yeah,
None of us know. If you guys know,
give us
Please
the answer. Share it. Drop it in the comments. Nick, what's next for you, bro?
Yeah, what's next? Very recently I've taken this shift into more building something that I can exit from. You know, I think for those that are listening that are building a personal brand, I think a personal brand is great, but just also understand that you can't necessarily exit, if that's your goal, exit from something that's tied to your name. And so more these days thinking in terms of scalability and being an exit, so building something that's not essentially tied to my face and my brand. I'm also thinking in terms of data. And so there's a lot of things like as an influencer or someone who's communicating is in front of a lot of people, the more data you can collect, the more knowledge you can get about people, and then you can take that knowledge and serve them at a deeper level. So those are like kind of like themes of my life right now are like scalability, want to exit, data, and then the other big thing is I'm creating a foundation called Influence for Good. And when I was younger, my dad promised to be my arms and legs until the day that he died. And there was a lot of foundations and fundraisers that help my parents fund specific things financially. And so Influence for Good will be a foundation where we are the arms and legs for kids who don't have arms and legs. And so we'll raise money in unique ways and then go on missions and give out wheelchairs and make wish lists and show up and just give the kids wheelchair ramps and cars and all the amazing things, and then do bigger trips where we give out hundreds of wheelchairs at a time. And so my shift has been more towards thinking way bigger. My theme, our company theme, is help a lot of people, make a lot of money, have a lot of fun. And so that's what I intend to do.
I love that, Nick, man. I wish the best for you now and in the future. I consider you a friend. You're an inspiration. I love listening to you speak. I love your story. And I'm glad that you're in a position where millions of people have the ability to hear your voice and learn from your story. And I hope they take something positive from it. I certainly have. So God bless you and thank you.
Thank you, my friend. We'll probably have to do another because we can go like 4 or 5 hours.
I know we can.
This is awesome. We're going to go in the studio together. We got some things cooking up.
Awesome.
But great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it, man.